right, folks. So Katie, let me know when you are ready to go live. All right, thank you, Katie. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tullahoma. Today is Sunday, the 26th of September, and it is very close to the first day of fall, the autumn equinox. So happy fall, happy autumn to everybody.
Thank you.
So
it was beautiful music and the visuals also. I really enjoyed that. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Cass.
Thank you both.
She selects the music. Yeah. So, all right, you're welcome. Yes, it was good. All right, so for our opening reading, and the readings today will have the theme of autumn or fall. So the opening reading comes from Sarah Getty McNeil. Come in with the crisp morning air outside. Come in wearing the autumn sunlight on your face. Come carrying the turning of the seasons in your heart. Whatever and however the greatness of life is speaking to you now, you are welcome here in our circle of friends. And we will now do the chalice lighting, another reading.
We light this chalice as autumn begins to kindle a flame of warmth as a reminder of the connection that draws us in to a community that opens us up.
We'll now go to announcements. Yeah, I have a couple. The board is working on setting up a retreat. I believe it's going to be a one-day retreat again at Tim's Ford. We're looking at the first Saturday in November 6th. So we'll have more information on that later when things get firmed up. Or Karen, have those arrangements been made for sure? You're muted. Karen, you're muted.
I already had the room reserved. I just didn't cancel the other things yet.
Okay, so we're set for the 6th.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right, so good. I assumed that, but just wanted to double check. Excellent,
Yep.
Thank you. The other thing is the latest COVID numbers. Chuck, Margaret's still compiling those, tracking those. And as of Wednesday, the numbers went down quite a bit from a week ago. Our 7-county region, there's a 7-day average per 100,000. It was like a week and a half ago, it was like 126 cases per 100,000. And as of Wednesday, it was 77 cases. So it went down. Let's hope it's continuing down and that's not just a little dip and we got another spike coming. But right now it looks good. So Chuck is going to continue watching that for us, monitoring it, and hopefully we're on the downhill side. So that is it for me. Other announcements. So if you have one, raise your hand, please. Carrie, yes.
For the retreat, we're asking if anybody has any ideas of activities they would like to see or conduct. Let one of the board members know.
Thank you, Carrie. One more announcement from me, our usual announcement about donations. If you wish to contribute financially to help the church, you can send a check to the UU Church of Tullahoma, P.O. Box 331 in Tullahoma, and the zip is 37388. So just wanted to add that. Any other announcements? Gene?
The Tullahoma Fine Arts Center now has an exhibit on that's going to end this next week. It exhibit of photos and paintings from Camp Forest during World War II, when Camp Forest was a prisoner of war center. And it's fabulous. It really is good. And also there's coming up a masquerade party where you can wear a mask with sequins and all that stuff if you want to. If any would be willing to come, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Selling tickets, by the way. So anyway, let me know and I'll make sure you get one.
I'll
And-
take one, Gene.
Do what?
When is it?
It's in October. I think it's the 16th, but I'll find out for sure. I'll let everybody know. That's why I blanked out for a second, was to run and see if I could find my notes on when.
Is that the same day as Peter's goodbye thing?
No, no.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll take a ticket, Gene.
Ah, okay.
As will I, Jean.
All right, thanks. I'll let you know more about it later.
Okay. Is the Fine Arts Center wheelchair accessible?
Yes.
Okay, I may give me 2 tickets and I'll bring my mom.
Okay.
You would love that.
Okay, guys.
Date one more time, please.
Don't everybody speak up for it at once.
Gene, when is the date again, please?
That's what I'm going to have to find out for
Oh,
everybody.
you don't know. Okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay.
In the kitchen to check my calendar, and I didn't write it down on there, so I'll find out.
Are they open this afternoon?
No, they're closed Sunday and Monday.
Oh, okay. I want to get to see that exhibit before it's gone.
Yeah, it's really spectacular. I couldn't believe it. It's
And I'll look for Tony's painting.
yeah.
All right, other announcements. If you have one, raise your hand, put your hand right up by the camera so I can see. We've got quite a few people here today, so your individual images are small. So if you have something to say, put your hand up in front of the camera. Any other announcements? Yes, Carrie.
Okay, next Sunday, Rabbi Rami Shapiro is going to be speaking to us. And he sent me the link to a video that he would like everybody to watch before his talk on Sunday. Let me pull up the title to that. It is
Okay.
Groping the Truth of One Through the Power of 10. He said the 10th of the month is, I think that's that's Sunday, isn't it? The 10th.
Mhm.
Yes, that is the Sunday they were calling the Power of 10 Day, which I have no idea what that means. Some of you might. But I'm going to send the link this afternoon. I'll do it after we finish here today so that everybody who's interested can watch it. He's one of our most interesting speakers, so I'm really looking forward to hearing from him.
Thank you, Carrie. And thanks for all the work you do for getting our speakers lined up. Appreciate it. Other announcements? Any other announcements? Nope. All right. We will then move on to our responsive reading, which comes from Sharon Salzberg, is a Buddhist teacher. Generosity has power because it is known by the inner quality of letting go, being able to relinquish, to give up, to renounce, to give generously.
These capacities spring from the same source within us.
When we practice generosity, we open to all of these liberating qualities simultaneously. They carry us to a profound knowing of freedom.
And they also are the loving expression of that same state of freedom. Fall, then, is the perfect season to give generously of your time and talents to others.
So with that, we will now move on to our speaker, and that is Tom Bentley. And the title he has shared with us is A Way to Look at Reality, a Model. So Tom, it is all yours.
Right. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Let's hope this works. We're
Good. And everybody who's not muted, go ahead and mute yourselves so that we don't interfere with Tom.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been looking at this thing for quite some time, and we're going to start with, whoops. Okay, what's happened already? Slideshow. Oh boy. Great. screen sharing. Well, let me try again. Boy, this is not good. Oh, good grief. I have no idea what's happened here. This has been. Okay, let's try this. All righty, this is in the cartoon from last night, and I thought it couldn't be any more appropriate. It's a Dilbert cartoon, and Dilbert's sitting in bed, and he says, "Do you ever wonder about the true nature of reality?" And this dog is sitting next to him. He says, "I mean, is any of this real?" The dog says, "Maybe we're a digital simulation that was designed to entertain a higher intelligence." And Dilbert says, "How would we be entertaining them?" And the dog says, "By the usual ways, by being idiots." And the dog says, "I have a little secret. Our creator is using me as an avatar to guide you, Dilbert, to a better understanding of your reality." Dilbert says, "I don't believe you." And the dog says, "He knew you would say that." So there we go. The alternate part of this, the title of this is The Stories We Tell Ourselves. And I think it's it's interesting. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we'll be doing some other things. This is a haiku. And I want you just to think about it for a second. "On my sunrise walk, forgotten laces untied, leaves crunch beneath my feet." So I ask you the question, what is the season? And the answer, of course, is autumn. And why is that? Well, the reason for that is we have experienced this before, that leaves are crunchy in the fall. And so we have a model in our head that deals with just that. We associate crunchy leaves with fall. All right, we're gonna well, I can back up a bit here. Oops, going forward. Previous. Dang. Okay. Is reality real? Such confusion. Can it be that it is all just illusion? Philosophers cogitate, scientists speculate, but none of them reach a conclusion. And these little short things here, the world may be a dream and existence may be an illusion, but to me, this dream or illusion is real enough if by using reason, well, we are never deceived by it. And there's others. Does time exist? This is by Pat Hine. I gravely doubt it, but Josh, what should we do without it? I've come to believe that the whole world is an enigma, a harmless enigma that is made terrible by our own mad attempt to interpret it as though it had an underlying truth. So I asked myself, and I think we probably all do from time to time, does our brain have an internal model of the outside world? And this is what Albert Einstein said. Reality that we think in our head is only an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. Reality, there's a mental model of reality within the mind of an individual. Really, does it really consist of the things of life that are commonly observed and verified to exist? Reality are the things that are consistent and not random or influenced by conformity or mass hysteria. Something that is perceived as real and is physically experienced by the senses. Some philosophers suggest that nothing is real, all is an illusion. However, scientists tend to ignore them. It doesn't matter anyway. Scientists say, for long as the illusion is consistent and behaves in a reliable and regular manner, we can do physics on it. Leave it to the philosophers to fuss about what is real. Certainly, though, through experience in what we perceive to be real or objective reality, we subconsciously develop models. These models help us deal with the sensory data in an efficient manner. And when decisions must be made quickly, the ability to develop these internal models certainly has survival value. Experimental databases significantly enable the brain to make the rapid life or death judgments. I have a neighbor who worked for a major car company, and his area that he deals with is around us, and he lives just in the neighborhood here. And I was walking with him, and he basically said what scares him most about where we're going with cars and such is that everything is being run by AI, artificial intelligence. This is without a model. You can write computer code to generate a response, but it's not based on physics in many ways. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But he was worried about the fact that in San Francisco, on the hills and all those crazy turns and all the strange stuff, and he sees cars that are running without gas pedals, without brakes, without steering wheels, and they're running and making left turns all around in San Francisco. I want to talk a little bit about the aha experience, sometimes known as the eureka effect. The sudden appearance of a solution or insight is often what we call that. The famous aha effect is a particular phenomenon experience that people have when they solve a problem. And researchers, and I've looked at some of these now, researchers have now put forward a new hypothesis that integrates the known features of insight experiences into a unitary framework. I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but the aha experience, I think, plays a fairly major role in how we develop internal models. So let's talk a little bit about some brain facts. That is, of course, that's a brain cell. There are dendrites that come into it, and there's an axon that goes out and feeds all the others that make up an assembly for doing something. Each individual neuron can form thousands of links with other neurons in this way, giving a typical brain well over 10 trillion synapses, up to 1,000 trillion in some estimates. Functionally related neurons connect to each other to form neural networks, also known as neural nets or assemblies. The more signals sent between two neurons, the stronger the connection grows. Technically, the amplitude of the postsynaptic neuron response increases. And so with new experience in each remembered event or fact, the brain slightly rewires its physical structure. This begs further explanation, and now here in our Amen, I think it's well due. How it does that is something else. So here is a picture of structure of a typical neuron. On the left there, you'll see dendrites. These are the input, if you wish, to the cell body. And then the axon and the myelin sheath and the Schwann cell moves out to the terminal and connect to other neurons, making a neural network. Dendrites show abundant branching. They do not have a consistent diameter, and the diameter goes on decreasing as they divide into more and more branches. This arbitrarization or tree-like pattern of dendrites is specific to different types of neurons. Axons are the cellular processes that carry the nerve impulses away from the body of the cell or of the neuron. And these cylindrical processes have a constant diameter throughout their length. In the case of motor neurons present in the brain, they can be as long as a meter. So modeling the brain, the mind is a modeling, how does modeling as a neural net relate to, one, the mind as a neural network, and an internal reality model versus an external reality? And how does the aha experience fit in? In a previous talk, I did talk a little bit about déjà vu and how that works. It's often interpreted as being it's proposed that it's a precognition, but in reality, it's a post-cognition. They're just a millisecond or so apart. And we interpret that as we've already been there before. It's an aha experience. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm proposing a model of sensory processing mind. The model treats the mind as a pattern recognition machine. And it's based on a control theory approach to the human body taught by T.C. Helvey in a class called Cybernetics. I took this class back in the 70s, and our textbook was Gray's Anatomy. This was an engineering class. And each of us addressed a different part of the systems that are controlled by the brain or by whatever, in terms of looked at it as a feedback loop, a control system, if you wish. Our memory model that resides in our brain is part of a feedback loop. The reward for congruence between our external worldview as viewed by our senses and our internal model is an aha moment, which usually comes with a shot of dopamine, invoking a feel-good response, which actually helps reinforce the neural connections. I applied my mind to the déjà vu experience, but still leaves many details unexplained. And this will be kind of an overview. I'm not pretending to be a biologist or a medical person, but I am familiar with a lot of these feedback loops and things. Experiences do form filters of the objective external world for which we experience through our brain in a censored sensory input. This forms the basis for our perceptions of internal reality that leads us to the law of attraction. Another time, another space. So here is a recognition model. In the upper left-hand corner, you see the observable world. This is what's out there. Okay, and that's what I'm calling objective reality. It's external from the body. It's objective. We think it's real. And as Einstein and others said, as long as it's stable, we can do physics on it. And that's the main thing. That is observed by our five senses: smell, sight, sound, heat, all those senses. Those create a neural model in the brain. We know that. If all of us were to close our eyes right now, you can imagine what is around you, and you can turn your head and look and see what you are looking at in your brain. So there is an internal brain that's, if you devoid of sight, for example, you have that model, very, very crude, but you can understand what it is. You know, it's good enough for making some decisions. So if sensory data comes in, brain creates a neural model in the brain and changes it over time, very much like an AI, artificial intelligence model. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the internal model of reality, which often especially the poets that I've worked with over the last 14 years or more, mistake that for reality. That is, well, it may be one's personal reality. It is just a model that's held inside your brain using neural nets. So how does this come to pass? Okay, so we have at the bottom, there's a subjective model of what's going on. And then we compare that with the sensory data coming in. That's the brain does that automatically. And if they compare, and the answer is yes, they do compare, they are similar, we get an aha, positive reinforcement of that subjective internal model. Okay. And that means a shot of dopamine. That means you're reinforcing a lot of the dendrite connections and that sort of thing. And the opposite can occur also. You can get rid of various things. And post-traumatic stress disorder is one where you've got an aha experience forming over and over again. Well, we won't go into it, but there's a connection there too, and it does explain some of that. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about modeling the mind as a neural net. Neural nets are a means of doing machine learning, which this is like a mathematical model, okay? And it would reside in a computer. Neural nets are means of doing machine learning in which the computer learns to perform some task by analyzing certain training examples. Most of today's neural nets are organized into layers of nodes, and they feed forward. One layer feeds the next, feeds the next. The neuron sends out spikes of electrical activity through the axon. They branch out into a conducting structure, which can be split into thousands of branches. And at the end of each branch, a synapse converts the activity from the axon into electrical effects that inhibit or excite activity of the contacted target neurons, like in a muscle, for example. When a neuron receives excitatory input that is sufficiently large compared with what's inhibiting that, it sends out a spike of electrical activity or action potential down its axon. So this is the model of an artificial version of what I just sort of described there. Artificial neural networks are composed of interconnected units which serve as model neurons. The synapse is modeled by a modifiable weighted associated with each particular connection. So if you look down the lower left there, there's different inputs, 1 through XM, and they have weights, okay? These are mathematical weights, okay? Like 1, 10, whatever, numbers. The more the weight is, that more that path gets enhanced, okay? The synapse is modeled, anyway, the dendrites sum up, and at some point, that's a little sigma there, the net input function. They add up, and then the activation response is if that sigma gets to be large enough, it'll go from a lower state, shown at the top on the right, and there's no input and there's no output. But if it gets high enough, it'll be an output. And that's basically how a neural net works, an artificial neural net works, and it's very similar to how the neural networks in our brain work. So y'all may remember this. This is AI, artificial intelligence in the palm of one's hand. If you're all familiar with 20 Questions, it was a computerized game that began, the game was around when I was a kid, let's put it that way. But then they put it into a ball, and I've got one, it's upstairs. But anyway, I brought it on and we could play with it at some point. It's a lot of fun. Basically, if you're not familiar with 20 Questions, us kids, we used to play with that all the time, especially going across country with a family. That was one of the things, 20 questions. starts out typically with animal, vegetable, or mineral, and then goes from there. And what comes to mind, is it bigger than a bread box or something like that? You get these answers. So this was a computer game that was to test artificial intelligence. It was invented by a guy named Robin Bergener in 1988. And then this handheld version was developed by Radica in 2003, but it was discontinued a few years back, but it was bought out basically, but you can still buy them. And I bought one just for this purpose. This is not mine. I've got another one upstairs though. So it's based on the spoken parlor game known as 20 Questions, and is also on a website and is in this handheld version here. The built artificial neural network is not resource intensive, and neither to store or to compute. Thus, it could be embedded in a small, less powerful device, such as this handheld version. And this contains just a portion of the original web knowledge base. People actually came online to train the original knowledge base neural net. The 20 question artificial intelligence is different from less flexible and extremely large expert systems, and its modularity is adaptable and scalable, means that it can be applied to other more complex devices. So here is how a neural net works, and I think I can explain this fairly well. We have input that we can sense. It's a cat and a dog. And we want to have an output that says cat or dog, okay? The one that has the largest number output or highest output, we'll say, is the answer. So if the largest output is defined as a cat, then there would be a good understanding that it's probably a cat. So here what we got. These are neural net connections. Consider the little circles to be neurons. And these are, in the sense that these are computer nodes, if you wish. And then there's the axons branch out and connect to all the other nodes, okay? And they go through several layers of this. The neural nets are connected in layers that feed weighted information through the interconnections, equivalent to the brain cells dendrites. And training the neural net is accomplished by rewarding these weighted connections when they produce a correct output. So the idea is you feed it an input. One of these may be, are their ears pointed? Or do they say meow? Or there's all sorts of things that you can make as inputs. In this example, we want to teach the neural net to determine if we are observing a cat or dog. On the output side, we have the attributes of either a cat or a dog. These could simply be vague responses to questions such as, does it have sharp pointy ears, yes or no? Or does it have a large nose? And that's kind of the kinds of information you would feed it. And you keep doing this over and over again with different people if you want to train it by using different people, and that's the way they did originally. Those were enough variability in it to train the neural net, and the weights were all adjusted through a model in there. So, okay. All right. So how do they work? Artificial neural networks are typically composed of interconnected units, which serve as model neurons. The synapse is modeled by a modifiable weight as a number associated with each particular connection. Most artificial networks do not reflect the detailed geometry of the dendrites and the axons, and they express the electrical output of a neuron as a single number that represents the rate of firing. So in the human brain, the synapses are firing at higher rates, or lower rates, depending on whether this is a good path to the correct results. And it's amazing that the brain pulls these things together on its own. But you can do this with this artificial neural net as well. So each unit converts the pattern of incoming activities that it receives into a single outgoing activity that sends to the other units. And then this way it keeps working forward, feeding forward. So how do you teach a neural net? Well, I've sort of alluded to it already. There's two ways to do it. There's a supervised and unsupervised way of training it. Supervised training involves a mechanism of providing the network with a desired output, either by manually grading the network's performance or by providing the desired outputs with the inputs. Unsupervised training is where the network has to make sense of the inputs without outside help. That's the way our brains work, without outside help. So there's these two approaches, but that's basically it. And that's, you train a neural net and then you embody it in a fixed form with all the weights fixed. And that's the way it goes into this little Radica thing. So how does this work? Well, if the ball gets the neural net, the 20 questions ball gets the right answer in its developmental stage, it gets a change in the numerical weights. If it's in your brain, you get a shot of dopamine. A few years back, I bought a 20 cube ball. I brought one and brought it to my Rotary meeting. And Dave Hebert, our AEDC historian, came in and I asked him to think of something. Okay. And I asked him, would you answer the questions that this is going to ask me? And I would feed his answers into the ball. And the answers are yes, no, unknown, and sometimes. And you keep working your way through it. Well, he did that, and we did the 20 questions, and finally the ball says, I'm thinking. And you are thinking of a goat. And you should have seen the look on Dave's face. I could see it to this day. He was absolutely startled by the response. And we do that all the time. I startle other people and you startle me. Okay. I'm going to kind of apply this recognition model to something, which is the deja vu experience. Deja vu is that, of course, that feeling one has lived through the present situation before. And the phrase literally translates as already seen. Although some interpret deja vu in a paranormal context, mainstream scientific approaches reject that explanation of deja vu as a precognition or prophecy. And it's not, it's just they're very close in time and we can't separate it out. A friend of mine, Fred Helsley, many of you may know him. He and I, back in the early 70s, would run into each other. Sometimes I'd go into his office and he would say to me in a very calm voice, I'm having a moment, and he's saying a deja vu moment. And the idea was to prolong that deja vu feeling for as long as possible. Well, what it takes is you can't change your internal model too much. Otherwise, when you compare the input data, your sensory input data, the sounds with the models, but the sounds should be, if you move too fast, they're not congruent and you don't get an aha experience. I took classes under C.J. Helvey, and as I told you before, we used Gray's Anatomy and we analyzed systems within the body, generally the endocrine system, visual things, startle responses, various things. And we do pretty well with that. So here's how you would explain déjà vu, kind of based on that recognition model. I've simplified it just a little bit. So upper left-hand corner again is the objective reality. In this case, it happens to be a outdoor market. Okay, so we see that our sensory inputs come in and feed the internal reality model. It's constantly being changed. You might think of this as kind of short-term memory, but it's more than that. It can be a long-term memory too. So that changes, modifies that internal reality model. And then if you go across to that compare box, it takes the internal reality model, what's going on in the brain, and compares it to the sensory input. And if they're sufficiently close together, we get a big aha experience. It's the fireworks and such. That produces a dopamine response, which reinforces the model in our brain. So it's a bit of a sensitive, and it keeps going around and around. Well, if the going around and doing this comparison is milliseconds, or a fraction of milliseconds. So our brain, we think it's immediate. A sensory input is exactly what we're seeing, and we're saying, I've been here before, because the internal model says we've been here before. So we get that aha experience. So anyway. So with this, we're at the end. I'm sorry, I'm going over quite a bit, but the brain does appear to form simplistic models of the external objective world. The internal models in our brain help us interpret situations efficiently. If you need to think whether that's a lion or a paper tiger or something, make that an internal model makes a big difference, and you need to be able to act quickly. So the internal models in our brain help us interpret these situations very efficiently. Okay, very important. And we can model brain functions usually using AI, artificial intelligence, but we also can fool ourselves, since our experiences are the filters of our senses, as in the déjà vu example. We fool ourselves into thinking that we've been here before. And in a sense, we sort of have, because our model was developed a millisecond or so before in the brain, and it compares with our senses, and they are congruent. And there you go. That's one of the conclusions that I drew from this. So I am pretty much through with this one. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. And yeah, very interesting. Appreciate it. We will now go to our closing, which Cass and I will read from the book 414.
As we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return.
It is now 5 after.